So my co-pastor is on, Wayne Bakken. So we planted Mosaic, but I've planted other congregations in different shapes and sizes. And I also worked at a large membership church. So I have kind of experience in all those backgrounds in terms of starting from scratch with no money to then building a budget, and then have worked with organizations with 7-figure budgets. So a wide variety of experience in that regard. And I also wear another hat. I work at United Theological Seminary, and I'm the director of what we call the Houses of Study. And so that is for different groups that maybe have a like-mindedness, that want to extend their learning in more of a cohort style. And so we have a Fresh Expressions House of Study. And so as master students, when they enroll, they'll have 4 elective classes all in Fresh Expressions tailored to that. And then we also have one of the largest D-Min groups in the country as well, our D-Min program. So if you're looking at extended education, I'd love to talk to you. Sue actually leads a group on floodgates, and it's focused on the renewal of the church. And so those are the different hats I wear, but more importantly, I'm married to this woman here.
And my name is Callie Picardo, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as Vice President for Development at United Theological Seminary. I have a heart and passion for what God's Word says, especially about finance and generosity. I come from a family of financial advisors. I did a business major in college and went into investment banking for a few years. I was in it when all the markets collapsed back in 07, 08, which was quite interesting. But at that time started saying, God, what do you have for me next? I don't feel like I'm supposed to stay in this world of investment banking, and ended up shifting into charitable giving. I started working for a large Christian community foundation, actually the 7th largest charity in the country, called National Christian Foundation, but a lot of people haven't heard of them because they are not the end users of generosity. Normally people give through them to other organizations. So I worked there for about 6 years, and the whole mission was just to encourage more generosity of the kingdom. So how do you help folks get more dollars to the causes that they are most passionate about, the local churches they go to, and to the nonprofits they care about? And then when we moved to Dayton, Ohio, got connected with United, and been here 6 years now, and get to serve our alumni and the donors and just tell them what God is up to. I mean, really, we want to be a movement, not an institution. And with that, it involves leading a movement of generosity. But I have a passion for helping people be freed up financially so they can follow God's call in their lives, both individuals and churches and nonprofits. And a lot of that is encouraging and unleashing just a movement of powerful generosity that nobody can stop because God's in it.
Amen. So what we want to share today is based on the book, but not necessarily the book, because we're tailoring this conversation all to you as pastors. And so we're going to share a PowerPoint with you today. Wouldn't be a presentation without a PowerPoint. And these are just principles that we have picked up and have learned along the way that we want to share with you. And so
how do I know?
There you go. There you go. So this is based on the book. And again, it's not comprehensive, everything that we cover. The book can help with small groups, Jesus followers as individuals, sermon series basis. It really talks about getting people free financially. But what we want to talk about today is, what do we do as the local church? How can we make a difference as pastors in really leading this generosity movement? And the first thing that really, the starting point is knowing your why. And it goes past having money to make budget, right? That's the what. Or paying a light bill or roof repair, any of those things. Knowing your why really matters. And so it's ironic because we have the largest opportunity than any other nonprofit organization. Think about how many times you ask for the offering or you take up the offering. That's at least 52 weeks out of the year, plus other individual requests. That makes you unique and different than any other nonprofit that may send you a quarterly mailer. but you get to be in front of people once a week. But what typically happens is we just kind of get into a rhythm and we invite the ushers to come up, and we don't take any time to cast vision or teach on the theology of giving or cast any kind of compelling vision. And so 52 weeks out of the year, you have the opportunity to share your why. But I think it's important. Many of you, of course, have finance teams, you have leadership teams. Have you talked to them about your why lately? Because a lot of times we get hung up on the what. Maybe the what is the worship service, or the what is, again, the budget, but knowing your why. And I think somebody that illustrates this really well is our friend Michael Jr. And so we want to just play this clip for you.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Lost, but now, right now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Let's go. Yeah.
Okay, here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
Do you get goosebumps? The second time he sang is a little different, right?
So the first time he knew what he was doing, and the second time he knew why. And how often do we get caught up just thinking about the what? And the what is usually what's most pressing or urgent from other people's perspective. but the why is something that should never change. And so how do you rediscover that? It might mean having a visioning time with your leadership board or your finance team. It might mean changing things up and saying, God, where are you taking us? What do you want us to do? Because oftentimes budget season comes around and we just think, well, we'll do the same thing we did last year, or the same thing with stewardship. And we're not going to really move the needle at all.
Do you remember the
God
lady?
may be calling you to do something different this year. So knowing your why is crucial.
Yeah, what if you started every meeting with that, especially the finance ones, but you could even extend that to every meeting you're getting ready, starting personally preparing with, okay, how is the why going to lead this? How is what we're about to do going to flow from the why? And something might change a little bit there. One of the things we mentioned was, the money follows the vision and mission. Like that's got to start, and that's knowing your why. I was at a business yesterday, a business for someone that makes soap. Well, in the lobby, in the break room, on the plant floor, were the vision, mission, and values of the organization. Everywhere you looked. I mean, they started with the visual, like what does it mean to have it like front and center, but also it was a part of the internal, and you could see it playing out just with the quality and the passion with which they did things. Beth, you mentioned earlier helping people move from that scarcity to abundance mindset. Here's a little graph that I came up with a couple years ago. Confession, I thought I was going to be a middle school math teacher. And then I realized I don't like classroom management, but I have this heart and passion for teaching people. So you all get a graph today. And here you see on the horizontal, the x-axis, we have physical wealth. Where is your congregation wealth-wise? I mean, do they have a lot of wealth? Are they on the rich side? Or do they have less wealth? Or are they kind of like, is it a stretch to make the budget each year? And you've cut the budget as much as you can, but they might not have as much physical wealth. So kind of take a minute and think, okay, where's my congregation? Where are some of the people I minister to on this physical wealth access? But then think about, where are they on this spiritual wealth access? Do they have an abundance mentality or a scarcity mentality? Do they live with that mindset of, oh my goodness, look how good God is. Look at what God has blessed us with. We have more than we could need. And gosh, we could share with others. Look at the impact we could have in the community. Or are they living more with that scarcity mentality of, we might not have enough. Like we have to cut ministry again, like, because we got to keep the lights on, we got to make sure we pay salaries. Like, no, we don't have money to invest in a new youth ministry. Like, where would that come from? We don't even know. Like, so think about, okay, where are they on that spiritual wealth line? And then, so you might have someone up in this quadrant to the top right where, they got wealth physically and they got the spiritual wealth, and they are all set to go. I think all of us would like to be in that top right quadrant. Wouldn't that be amazing? But you can also have a lot of physical wealth and be in the lower right quadrant where there's a lot of wealth, but people aren't free to be generous because they feel like they don't have enough. Or then
they feel the church has enough.
Yeah, the church has enough and they don't need my money. So I shouldn't have to give. And then you might be in the situation where they have that scarcity mentality and they really don't have a lot. But then you have some neat churches that are in that top left quadrant, and they might not have a lot of physical resources, but they have that spiritual wealth. So everything they have belongs to the Lord, and they just want to be able to give and be a blessing. And, that is an incredible spot to be. And that's an area where you might just help with some tools for getting out of debt, for saving. Like, you can help with some practical tools that'll help them grow. But honestly, they've got that abundance mentality, which God's going to use. That's that little boy that's saying, hey, Jesus, here, 5 loaves and 2 fish. This is my lunch. Like, would this help? And Jesus is like, let me take this and I'm going to do a miracle with it because you have entrusted me with all that you have. So think of for a minute, where's your church? But also take a minute and think, where are you personally? because it's hard to lead someone somewhere that you haven't been yourself. So if you're working on moving to better physical wealth stewardship, then you can help lead your church that way. If you're working on moving from a scarcity mentality to more of an abundance mentality, you'll be able to help your church get there too. So figure out where you are personally, but then also where's your church or some of the people you serve, because we're going to build from there.
So with igniting this generosity movement and thinking toward that, we mentioned the power of vision casting at the beginning. And during the offering moment is crucial. It's going to separate you from any other organization 52 weeks a year. So really what you do is share about the return on investment. We use impact stories and what's happening in the life of the church. So it's very rare that we just get up and say, all right, don't have anything for you, but it's time to take up offering. This past weekend, we had school supplies that folks brought and had purchased over 100 backpacks with all kinds of supplies. All that was on near the altar area. And so we had that out. We not only did that, but we helped a single mom coming out of recovery, moved into one of her first homes. And so she needed a fridge and an oven. So we were able to get that. And then we were a sponsor for a recovery rally. So I got to share those three things about the way that their giving is impacting others in the community.
Roz wasn't even preaching on Sunday. I was the one preaching, but he was doing the offering moment. And after a while, he said, I got to cut myself off. I'm not supposed to be preaching today, but I feel like I could preach because God is so good. And look what God is doing through the generosity of the community. I mean, the offering moment became almost, it can be even more powerful than the sermon.
Yeah, so you have the stories and the highlights, whether it's personal transformation that's taking place, or hey, we just had a VBS with 50 kids. I don't know. Share that with the congregation in the setting of this is your return on investment for the kingdom of God. So I just challenge you, don't waste that opportunity, but prepare for it just like you would prepare for a sermon. Use that kind of methodology because it will make a difference as people catch on and they're understanding the vision. So the first way you can do that, of course, is highlighting things that are happening. But these impact stories are incredible. So think about the life of your church and how you're getting involved and how maybe you're reaching people in the community or you're reaching people from within. The second, way of doing these impact stories are testimonies. So you can do this through video. You can do this live, but asking people, why do you give? And don't just do it for 1 month out of the stewardship kind of series. Sprinkle it all year long because that's what stewardship is, right? A regular part of our discipleship. So ask people why they give and how God has encouraged them in their generosity and faithfulness. So we started recording these testimonies. And if you don't have the production and all that, do it live. Whatever you do something, but be methodical about it. You could even do it once a month. Here's an example of one of them.
I work for a nonprofit in Centerville that I've been at for over 20 years. So I do residential day programming for adults with developmental disabilities. In the parking lot at Christ Church was the first time I heard about Mosaic, and my heart sunk a little. I didn't want it to be. I knew right then in that instant that I was moving churches and this is what it was going to be. But I was really comfortable at the church that I was at. So moving churches wasn't something that I really wanted to do. God's given me the gift of caring for people in different capacities, specifically marginalized people I feel very called to. So I've had a lot of opportunity at Mosaic to engage with people and kind of pour into their life. And in return, they pour into my life and my kids' lives. So you can sit on a Sunday morning and watch people from every different walk of life worshiping together in a movie theater, which we turn into a worship center every Sunday. And there's times that, almost every Sunday, I feel like I have tears in my eyes and goosebumps that you can't deny. That is the Holy Spirit alive at Mosaic, watching all these people united, worshiping one God. Moving over to Mosaic was definitely an act of obedience initially, and now it's become home. So this is my son Braden. He's almost 13. And my other son Matthew, who is almost 12, and my daughter, Miss Emily Grace, who is 7. So family life at Mosaic for us is all hands on deck. So we roll in about 7:45, usually on Sunday mornings, and my kids kind of go to their spot and they help. So whether that's set up, baby stuff, helping me set up for hospitality, coffee, whatever it is, we're kind of all in together. So, and then they're there for both services, so they worship one and serve one too, like most of us do. And Emily serves in the nursery almost every Sunday on second service, and the boys help with setup and tear down. Help with met and tech stuff, or with Stephanie or whatever in the back. So many years ago when I started tithing, a crazy pastor said to me that we shouldn't be throwing 20s in the plate, we should be doing percentage giving, and that stuck with me. And I started at 3%, and that was about 8 years ago. And so every year, as I've gotten annual raises and things like that, then I've looked at our budget and increased our annual tithe accordingly. So, and up to this year, we're now given at 11% our tithe, plus then offerings in different capacities after that. We're replacing our air conditioner unit this week, just like normal people do, but you still make it work. It just works. So I've never, I don't know. I mean, I'm a single mom, so a single mom with 3 kids, and finances are on the top of our list, managing that budget and doing that, but God's never failed us in that. So.
Pretty simple, straightforward. Carrie has adopted those 3 kids, single mom, and is an incredible and faithful leader at our church. But what a testimony about giving. You know, she raised it every single year. So now she not only tithes above and beyond, but she also gives her offerings above and beyond for special causes. And so being able to really show this to the congregation can inspire them as well. So there's specific on giving, but then here's another one we produced with Chris Puderball.
When I'm not at Mosaic, I am a caseworker at Joshua Recovery. Most people know I'm in recovery from drug addiction myself. My first week at the Joshua Recovery, I came in, and another brother had invited me to the Mosaic concert in Lafino Park, and I've kind of been a part of it ever since. So it's been a long journey. I was just getting my bearings on, like, you know, my life and, you know, where I was going to go. It's opened so many doors in my life today, just being a part of Mosaic. And I do greeting, and I'm on the hospitality team, and just to be able to welcome each and every person that comes in, you know, it's allowed me to build so many relationships with people. And for me, being, you know, living in addiction for so long and being in recovery, it's really helped me find my true identity, which, you know, is in Jesus Christ. But it's allowed me to relate to people and connect, and to know that Mosaic allows a recovering drug addict to stand at their front door and welcome people. It's been a very humbling and awesome experience. As I've went through this addiction, you know, and I struggled, where so many kids struggle today, you know, and I've walked those paths. I've came out of the darkness, and I can speak into these kids' lives to show them, you know, it's not about being cool and all that, because addiction it's been like 15 years of addiction. But yeah, just the youth, the kids bring me so much joy, and it's also a sense of accountability with them as well, you know, because they look up to me in a sense, and, you know, I got to be there for them just like everybody else. It's so cool. Every day is just so much joy and love. It's just experiencing the love of Jesus through other people and community. Here, it's just come as you are. We love you however, and the different nationalities, and it's been pretty cool for me as well, because my mom's actually from Hawaii, so growing up in a small town, I was looked at as different, you know what I mean? So it's just a place to fit in, feel welcome. I've built relationships with people that I've never experienced before in my life. It's, you know, truly they're my family, you know, and but I'm just excited to be able to walk out this calling that God's got on me, you know, starting student ministry in the fall. I'm excited to see how that goes, and just on for the ride for what Jesus got in store. So I'm excited.
So you notice there, it's life transformation. And so being able to capture that, whether it's live or on video, but I think sprinkling those into your worship planning will help give people a reason as to the why behind giving.
And then we connect the dots too. We say, because you give, people like Chris are a part of the mosaic. And who are the other Chris's out there that God is going to use you to bring into this beautiful body of Christ? And so we use it as an opportunity to say thank you, but also say thank you because you give, this is possible. So that is a regular part. It's also a time where you can do some teaching about generosity. So there are 2,350 verses in the Bible about finances and money. So there are a lot of great ones to use. One of my favorites to use is Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I'll just remind people as that, you know, we don't give, this is not a time to give out of guilt because you feel like you have to. God doesn't actually need your money, but he wants your heart, because he said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so as we give, it draws our heart closer to God. It puts God first in our heart. And then God allows us to be a blessing and be a part of, you know, just that overflow of generosity to the kingdom. To, you know, God could make money rain from trees if he wanted to, but he chooses to put it in your pockets and mine. And so we get this awesome privilege of being God's hands and feet with generosity. And so I could talk about giving all day long because I love it. But you know, that's kind of an example of how I would make that tie. One of the other things too is we try to make sure that giving, that time is not kind of like a intermission. It's not a break. Like, how does it flow from what you've just done in worship to what you're getting ready to do in worship? So often our giving moment will flow out of a song. And so often we will, you know, not just say, and now it's time for the offering, but like, you know, what is that transition? So sometimes we'll pray out of that song, or we'll connect the dots of that song that we just sung. You know, maybe it's about the love of Christ, and hey, isn't it incredible that we can know the love of Christ ourselves? And because of you, because of the ways you give, how you serve, and because of your prayers, God is using us to share the love of Christ with others. So think too about, how does it transition smoothly? How does it flow where it is really all worship? Because we see giving as an act of worship as well. And with those testimonies too, you know, I'd encourage each of y'all take some time, think about, what is your own giving testimony? You know, maybe write it out or share it with someone, or share it on Sunday. You know, if you're thinking, gosh, who can I get to share their testimony? Make sure you've got your own personal testimony first and practice sharing that some, and that'll help inspire others as well. Sorry, push the forward button and start playing the video again. Let's get to the next slide.
So here's some ways of encouraging generosity.
So we mentioned the offering moment. It's also something we preach, not just in an annual stewardship campaign, but we tie in year round. So for instance, this spring, we were doing a sermon series called Hidden Figures, and we were highlighting some of the women in the Bible, especially in the early church, that often go behind the scenes. And as we looked, each of them were incredibly generous. So we lifted up generosity, not as the main sermon topic, but it was in scripture. And so we just called that out as we were going through. And, you know, then we were in a worship series this summer, and we were talking about King David, who worshiped for God with all his heart. And then he gave to the people, you know. And so where does generosity already come up in the scripture text you're handling? Or where is it an illustration of an outplay of one of the practical steps that come out of a sermon you're doing? You can incorporate it year round. It's also something that's important to teach, you know, to teach generosity. So we have done Crown Financial Ministry at our church before. We've done the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace. We have, with our Money Talks book, we're coming up with a series of videos that a small group could do and go through it as a study together. But it's powerful to have those small group times too, where people can really dive a little deeper and also have the practical applications to have some tools to budget, to come up with a debt repayment plan, to actually decide with God what they're going to give, what percentage of their resources they want to give back to God. And then we celebrate, each victory at the church is an opportunity to say thank you and because you gave. And then we've got to model it ourselves. So what does it look like to live it out personally?
So you can't thank people enough. I'm convinced of that. And so ways to celebrate that, what we've done is impact gatherings. And so these are nights, you could do them twice a year, once a year. This time of going over the budget for the following year doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be just a business meeting, but how do you build up a celebration around it? And so we started calling these impact nights, impact gatherings, and you can, depending on your budget, you could use dinner or you could do dessert. We've done dessert, but we have a time of worship as we gather people together. We thank God for what God has done. We celebrate the victories. And so we'll give kind of a highlight reel of, hey, here's everything that has happened this year, and it's because of your generosity. And then, of course, we do go over, the state of affairs with the finances and what the next year looks like by casting a compelling vision. And so here's one of our nights, and we just encourage people and get people excited. And so worship is a great way to set the tone, and then the opportunity maybe to write down some questions for people, and they can, you can answer them. But these nights are inspirational, they're to encourage, and then also informational as well. This is more your stakeholders, the people that call your church their home church and want to be invested in the future, have an invested interest. They kind of get a sneak peek as to, hey, here's what's coming up in the future, or here's one of the dreams that we have. We want to have a community center, and here's what it's going to take. It's a great opportunity to cast vision and get people excited. So have you ever had an impact gathering before? If not, maybe it's time to schedule one. And definitely, I would recommend at least doing it twice a year.
So also personal gatherings, like one-on-one with people. So in fundraising for the seminary, I know what each person gives. I know when their pledges are running out. I'm thanking them. One of the cool things I do often is I will print out their giving record and show them, hey, I know this is, probably what you've given recently, but did you know that over the course of the time you've been giving here, you have given this total amount? And sometimes that becomes this just incredible, like, wow moment. I think of King David, who said, God, who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? But I regularly meet with our top donors one-on-one, helping them go deeper in their generosity. And this is something that the church often shies away from. Many churches don't even let the pastor know what people give. Various reasons for that. You like to think that all the time it's good motives. They don't want the pastor to favor anyone. I've known some pastors that have then found out the giving later and realized, oh, my finance chair is not actually giving, or they're just giving a little here and there. And so, but knowing that is important. And one of the things we do before we invite someone to be on a leadership role, on a leadership board, on a leadership team at our church, is we make sure they're tithing, or, we don't ask for tax returns or anything like that. We're not, that crazy. But, if we know that they are, say, a doctor and they're given $20 a year, they're not tithing. You can kind of get a good enough sense, but we want to make sure that they are leading, not just with their serving, but also with their giving. And so what does that look like? But then there's often pushback. And one of the things, if you are in a church where you are not allowed to know the giving of your congregation. And if that's something that you want, there are just a couple different tools you can use. One, sometimes it's helpful to have an outside person share with the church that it's important for the pastor to know this. So sometimes bringing in an outside consultant can help, open some doors there. You can also say, hey, I was on this webinar recently about encouraging a generosity movement. And they said, in order to do that, I need to know what people are giving so I can help them grow in their generosity. But a third thing is, really you think about if someone is in addiction recovery, you might disciple them differently. If someone is struggling with maybe the relationship with their spouse or the relationship with your kids, you're going to disciple them differently. If someone has large amounts of wealth, that can be such a temptation to rely on your money and your finances over God. So there's an opportunity for discipleship that looks different, for encouraging someone to use their gifts that God's put in their heart and really to unleash that generosity in their own life. Giving is the only antidote I've found to greed and materialism. So to help someone take that next step in their generosity, it often requires one-on-one getting together and encouraging them and just saying, hey, what does God put on your heart? Like, what do you love to give to? Like, what is your passion? And in some cases, it'll be at the church, and sometimes it's outside of the church. But, we as leaders have to have that abundance mentality as well. So what does it look like if someone says, well, gosh, I have a passion for helping teen moms. And that's not something the church is doing. You still encourage the giving of the church, but this nonprofit in the community that is doing awesome work with teen moms who have chosen that just need a little extra help, or their passion is over here with recovery. And, the church doesn't have a recovery ministry, but what would it look like to help them partner? And maybe it opens the door for partnership with the church because the donor is giving there. Donors that people in the church that have a heart for generosity and the ability to give, often they're not going to stop giving to their church. They're just going to give elsewhere on top of that. So how do you encourage them in their walk with God to follow God's call in their life? Often that's going to come out in those one-on-one conversations.
And it's not what we want from people, it's what we want for people. Because oftentimes, more than not, people want to be generous and give. They just don't know how.
I don't know anyone that says, I want to be stingy and hoard all my money. Generosity is people want to be generous.
But these personal gatherings will help you know people's passion. And you wouldn't be surprised someone is passionate about kids and say, hey, I'm willing to underwrite this whole event or this whole endeavor. But you wouldn't have otherwise known that if you weren't gathering with them in a personal way.
I met with a donor for the seminary yesterday, and he was just saying, I love to give to things that really are needs that no one's paying attention to. Do you have anything that, you're not fundraising for because you have other focuses, but it's something that needs getting done? And we just said, we need new carpet. Our seminary, the carpet looks terrible. And they said, hey, get a quote. And so, if you have those one-on-one meetings, if you don't ever get into those conversations, you won't know what's on the heart of people. And, we didn't get together to ask with money. We just got together with him to say, thank you, let him know the impact of his giving. And then he said, hey, what can I give to? I want to keep doing this.
Of course, we've talked about, this is classic stewardship series. So we said, hey, do it, have a 12-month stewardship plan, but then be very intentional about the stewardship series and have a study along with it, something that will be, that can accompany it and really break it down and take people deeper. Don't just talk about giving in general, but I think stewardship as a whole, it all belongs to God. But, the way we break down our resource is, we get into talking about earning, saving, and giving, and spending as well. And so, earning, what does that mean? Well, workaholism in America is out of control, right? Are you earning by doing something illegal, or are you just sacrificing so much family time and personal health so you can earn as much as you can? And so there's some warning signs that John Wesley, the founder of our Methodist movement, had written about. And so what does a sermon on that look like? Or, how do I spend my money? How am I Even if I give to the church and I'm tithing, what do I do with the rest of my money? The
Yeah, and
90%.
If it all belongs to God, the spending part matters just as much as the giving part.
Saving, the same thing. Saving is a wise thing to do, but is there something unhealthy about hoarding maybe? And so we break that down. So you can get into different topics, not all centered around giving, but stewardship finds its tentacles in all of these other things. I mean, you think about simplistic living, all those things, and sustainability. So we have this series available. It's on a Sermon Series Pro with Sermon Central. I think it's $50 it costs, but through Outreach Magazine, and comes with 4 sample sermons. Of course, you can buy the book, Sermon Series graphics, video bumpers, and even an outreach plan on how you can launch this at your church.
Roz and Callie, can you say the website name again so people can get that down on where that can be found?
Yeah, and we'll drop it in the link here in a sec.
During the Q&A time, we'll get it in the chat there for you, because that'll probably be the easiest way. The other thing that we do is we do at the church quarterly giving statements throughout the year. And we don't just send them the statement, but we actually include a letter with them. Again, an opportunity to cast vision that shares, hey, here's the impact of your giving. Thank you. Here's the record of what you've given so far. And you have to do it at the end of the year in January for the previous year for tax purposes. But if you do it throughout the year, it gives people that opportunity to say, oh, I have not given as much as I meant to, or oops, I missed a week, or, it'll help them know where they are. So if they have the intention to give, but life's gotten in the way, it allows them that opportunity earlier in the year to catch up. But that is an opportunity to also really cast vision and also say thank you. One of the other things we do is a year-end report. What does that look like? And you can get creative if you want, and it might be video or it might be a document. If you can make it visual, great. I know some of it depends on the resources, but what does it look like at the end of the year to say, hey, throughout the year, you all as a community, as a church body, gave this much to help here. And here's just an example of what one church did. They shared, hey, here are some of the numbers of people who've gotten baptized. And hey, we had 9 picnics and parties at the church, fellowship opportunities, and then this church does Project Sundays. So they talked about the number of people involved each year and how that's grown. And then the areas it's impacted, from businesses to agricultural, neighborhoods, families, art, medical, foster care, parks, homeless. And so think about what's a simple way to communicate the impact of what people have given during a year. And then we always encourage multiple ways of giving. There's not just the offering plate. And it doesn't even have to be a plate either. During COVID, we started using fishnets because we could stretch and it could be socially distanced. And then you didn't have to have people physically all touching the plate to pass it. The usher was just holding the end of the fishnet and they could go around. So, you can get creative there, but we always give people the opportunity to give online. Our church has an app as well. And then we've got a QR code. And so we have the QR code actually on the back of the chairs for the people in front of them. So people can just take out their phone and scan the QR code, and it takes them directly to a landing page where they can check in, register their attendance, they can give, and they can share their prayer requests as well. I know a lot of churches do text to give. And then, if you've got folks that are wealthier, they can get some better tax benefits by doing things like giving stock, doing charitable IRA rollovers. And the church does not have to become an expert in doing this in order to do this. Our church often will partner with a local community foundation, or National Christian Foundation is where I worked before. So our church has been set up with them too, because the gift of stock can go through the foundation. The foundation handles the receiving. They have an investment account. They sell the stock the next day. They know how to handle it all. And then they just send the church a check for the proceeds. So the church is still just receiving a check, but the donor is getting extra benefits by avoiding capital gains tax, And those are typically larger gifts too. So to be able to encourage and just even putting it out there, sometimes it's as simple as, listing and giving options. Hey, for gifts of stock, IRA rollovers, or other gifts of appreciated assets, call the church office number or whatever the best handoff is. And then you can help figure out how to process that, but don't feel like you have to do those things yourself. And you can even ask some local churches in your area or local nonprofits, maybe how they handle some of those type of gifts. Or if you've got a local community foundation, they often love to partner and be able to handle those gifts, and then the church can benefit from there.
So here's our contact info in case you'd like to maybe reach out to us personally or you have any questions. Of course, part of this webinar, you're going to receive the book, but maybe you have a specific question or possibly ways that we can help. We would definitely love to partner with you in any way. And remember, you're not alone in any of this. Ask questions, ask colleagues, and so this is what a 12, these are some of the ingredients of helping you start this generosity movement in your local church.
So everybody, thank you, Roz and Callie, for what you've just put out there. And have you been thinking about what questions for you come out of this? Where are your challenge points in the movement of Jesus called the church that you lead? What would you like more ideas about? Or, we can play Stump the Picardos, see what you can do. And they have probably been there, done that, and navigated it. So, Roz and Callie, would you like people to just unmute themselves and speak up?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
Okay. What's running through your mind? Just unmute yourself and speak out.
Hi there. Thank you for your information. I just put in the chat, do you have more videos that might help us along as we try to put some of these things into action?
Videos help me, like videos like
YouTube videos of maybe this this program or others like it.
Oh, yeah. So just some great, I love generosity resources. So there's a website called I Like Giving, and I Like Giving has all sorts of inspirational videos, and they will share kind of a story where generosity had a huge impact. So one of my favorites on there is called I Like Car. They all kind of follow that. I like giving, like I like car, I like whatever it might be. And it's the story of a couple that they were saving up for something, but then they found out the need of a woman that needed a car. And they said, well, we could do that. And they were going to get a used car. And when they called up the dealership said, well, do you want a new or used car? And it just kind of caught them like, no, we're going to buy her a brand new car. Like it was just it's just an incredible story, but they have so many different stories like that. Generous Giving has a lot of great videos as well. And it kind of depends. You kind of got to pop through and see what'll fit for your context, what doesn't. There's one on there, a couple that are on there. One's work like a doctor, live like a nurse. And we share that story in our book. It's a woman who's an OBGYN who, was really saving aggressively for retirement. And God kind of had her reevaluate. Like she was almost getting to the point of hoarding, and God said, no, I want it all. And I want you to work like a doctor, but live like a nurse. So she figured out, okay, if I lived on a nurse's salary, what would that look like? And then started giving above and beyond, and just seeing God provide, like opened her heart. There's I think a video on there as well called A Handful of Rice that kind of gives a very different context, kind of more of that financially poor, but abundance mentality of, I forget what country it's in, but there was this movement where they would just, as they were preparing rice, they would scoop up a handful of rice and put it in a jar to donate. And so, folks that were living on, well below the poverty line, but whenever they would prepare their rice, they would just scoop a handful out with their hand and put it in a jar to donate. And then they would donate it. And just the amount of people that have been blessed, just that powerful movement of grassroots generosity of a lot of people just taking a handful of rice and saying, I could use this to feed my family, but I want to give back. And so those are a couple spots where you can find some great videos to encourage generosity, and some tools to share. NCF Giving, N as in Nancy, CF Giving, is National Christian Foundation's website. And that's where they have a lot of resources that explain different ways to give. So if you're thinking, gosh, I'd love to kind of figure out like a charitable gift annuity or stock, or they have some video resources as well, but they have a lot of just conceptual 1 or 2 page papers that just explain, hey, here's the benefits of a stock gift or things like that, that are resources that can be useful. So you don't have to figure out how to explain something yourself. You can kind of say, hey, and like walk through that with them. And then if someone's interested, then actually get the expert in. You just have to know enough to get them asking the question, and don't, please, even though I know a lot about this stuff, I make sure folks know this is not tax advice, this is not legal advice. Please talk to your accountant or financial advisor. These are just some questions you can ask, and maybe some ways you can get more dollars to the church that were otherwise going in taxes.
Thank you so much.
What other questions, anything we addressed or maybe didn't address that you want to dialogue on?
I just had a question on ways that we can look at helping the congregation move from a scarcity mentality more towards an abundance mentality.
You're just asking what are some different ways we can do that?
Yes.
Yeah. And so in my mind, generosity flows out of gratitude. So if I catch myself living in that scarcity mentality quite a lot. And often it's, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough resources. It's all that I don't, it's that all that negative language. But then when I switch the mentality and start giving thanks, gratitude's a great way to start thinking, God, thank you for waking me up this morning. Thank you for my health, for my loved ones, for a job that, even though I feel like, gosh, I don't have enough hours in the day to get my job done. But Lord, look, you've given me a job where I can use my gifts, where I've got resources, where I can be a blessing to others. God, you've given us a house with the roof over our head. God, we've got food in the refrigerator. I mean, when I start being with that gratitude mindset, that's a powerful way to switch from scarcity to abundance. So what does that look like in the church? I mean, it looks different one-on-one versus when you're doing this from a congregational setting. But, so for instance, you're in, if it's Sunday morning, you can start saying, look at all the things that God's been doing, and start naming some of the things you've seen God doing. That can also be really good in a finance team meeting, like, hey, look at all that God's done lately. Like, have you seen this? And maybe with the finance team, it's a story of someone who called up the church office that wanted to make a gift that was beyond their normal. And it's just that even those little stories of gratitude, of God moving, of God's provision, or of someone stepping up to give, that inspires more generosity. I've noticed this with my work at the seminaries. When I share some of the stories, even anonymously, people say, someone else did that? Maybe I could do something like that. Or next time I get a opportunity to give, or, and it doesn't have to be big. It's just those acts of generosity. Like, one of the things that comes to mind is a young lady from the last church we served, who her birthday was around Christmas. And so at Christmas time, she would ask for people to bring gifts, not for her, but that could be donated to a local charity in need. And so to help other kids who might not have Christmas gifts. And so sharing that story on a Sunday just encourages people of that, gosh, if a little kid is going to give up her birthday gifts to help others in need, like I can share. So, it's those stories of both gratitude and generosity can shift the mindset. There's power in testimony.
And we stopped whenever we've done pledge cards. I know some of you may do that. We call them gratitude cards. And so even the name. And so it's taking, maybe rethinking what we do normally for stewardship and flipping it on its head. And really, how do we recontextualize and package it from an abundance gratitude mindset versus, oh, it's stewardship time and they're doing the same thing they always did, so I'm not going to come to church for this month. That's the common joke, right? Whenever we do that. Another thing, we talk about gratitude and thanking people. Knowing who your first time givers are is important too, in tracking that. Your finance team or whoever it may be, everybody gets a letter from myself and Pastor Wayne whenever there's a first time giver. We're acknowledging the gift, even if it's $2. If they're a first time giver, we're saying thank you, because that communicates showing gratitude. And in that letter, here's some of the, because of your generosity, we can do these different things. And so it's one further step, even like what we talked about with the quarterly statements. Some people send statements out at the end of the year. Hey, this is how much you've given. But the quarterly statements isn't just for tax purposes. We use it as a way to cast vision with a letter. And then we're thanking people. And then people are maybe considering, oh, I'm actually behind on where I want to give this year, so I need to step it up. And that more often than not happens.
Sue Nielsen-Kibbe is very good at this what if or do you suppose language that also is really powerful too. But what if God might want to do something bigger here? Do you suppose God might be calling us to make an impact here or to reach this group? Or that language of possibility of what if gets people out of but this is reality to the dreaming of what could be that vision casting. So funny story, when Roz asked me to marry him, I said yes, but and not actually when he proposed, I did just say yes then. I was super excited. But then a few months later, we were going through premarital counseling. And one of the things that came up is I said, finance is so important to me that if we're going to get married, can we go through the Crown Financial Ministries Bible study together first? I said, I'm trained to be a facilitator, but I could use a co-facilitator, hint, hint. And so we led a group in our church through Crown Financial Ministries Bible study. And we got married about halfway through. So we had to take like a 2-week break for our wedding and honeymoon. And there was actually a couple that got married right before the study, and then a couple that got married right after the study. So the power of doing that teaching, well, halfway through the study, when we got to the point on debt, that couple getting married right after said, well, do you suppose this means we shouldn't put our honeymoon on the credit card? And we said, there might be another way. And so we said, you suppose God might have another plan for that. And so they figured, okay, well, we could still go on a really nice honeymoon, but here's another option that's going to cost half the price. And then they took odd jobs to work together towards earning and saving for that honeymoon. And so started out their marriage not with extra debt, but with having worked together and saved together for an incredible trip to start their marriage off together. Soon after that Bible study, Roz and I walked into church one morning, and some of the ceiling in the sanctuary was on the floor. And we said, oh, I don't think we can put off a new roof any longer. So the finance team said, great, well, we'll look at getting a loan, kind of that scarcity mentality. And Roz used some of that do you suppose language or in what if language. And he said, if we do that, do you think that might be denying God an opportunity to provide? Like, what if God wants to provide for a new roof? And so they said, you're crazy, but if let us know when you're ready to get the loan. And so, but he got their permission to see if they could raise money for the roof. Well, they figured out there was hail damage. So they were able to get some insurance money to cover part of it. And then they just put the need out there and showed not just, hey, we need a new roof, but let me tell you all the incredible ministry that happens in this space, not just the church, but all the people we partner with because of this space, all the people that are using this space to reach out to the community around us and all the lives that are being transformed here. And would you be willing to give? And so we raised all the money for the new roof, but that scarcity mentality, the finance team was ready to go for a loan. But Roz used kind of that what if possibility language to say, what if God wants to provide? What if God wants to do a miracle? Like, what if we just tried it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi.
Randy.
Hi, good to see you guys. Thanks so much. This is great. Do you do a, whatever terminology you use, a stewardship Sunday or a gratitude Sunday like we've been doing the last couple of years? And then if so, how do you go about that? Any tips or hints you want to give to us to how you do that well? And also, how do you go about getting speakers for that? Because that's been kind of the hardest thing. If you do, get speakers, sometimes we've done that, sometimes we haven't. But what kind of advice would you give for stewardship or gratitude Sunday?
Yeah, I would say knowing the context of the church, first of all, because not every church does this. Some do and some don't. So I think knowing the context, experimentation is always good. If it's gratitude Sunday, right, or commitment Sunday, we call it, I would treat it more as a celebration. And so giving people something to look forward to. And so whether it is a guest preacher, whether it's testimonies of God's faithfulness, we just heard some testimonies on video. You could do that live. You could invite a speaker from another church or, in the United Methodist Connection, you could do that. You could reach out to different, even pastors that maybe are out of the denomination. Maybe they're in opportunity, especially if they're really good at having a compelling vision and can share and it can encourage generosity. I think treating it different as a set aside Sunday is key versus it being just like every single one that you've done in the past. So adding the variety and the flavor of what represents the local church, because the commitment's to God first and foremost, but then you're using that to fund all of the ministries. And so what does it look like to highlight some of those ministries leading up to that commitment gratitude Sunday? I think there's multiple ways you can do it. Again, context is everything, but then also being willing to experiment a little bit as well.
And I don't think I've ever seen Roz do one the same way. Now that part of that is Roz loves change, but like he changes it up every year. So it doesn't get old and stale and boring. Like it's a little different each year. And I think one of the key things though is if you want the congregation to be excited about it, you've got to be excited about it personally. So if you are dreading Commitment Sunday, like, oh, I've got to ask the congregation for money, like that's going to come through even if you try to hide it. So go back to your internal why. I mean, we started with that, like it starts with why. So what is your internal why? What is your excitement for that Sunday? Like, are you excited to see that those step ups in faith and generosity, like what God might do in some hearts by setting them free to step out in faith and give maybe beyond what they've ever done before, to take that next step? Like, what does it look like to get excited? Or maybe it's, I just can't wait to see our church come together to celebrate all God's doing in our midst. Like you've got to have that internal excitement that comes out if you want to get other people excited. I've seen too many though, where it's like, oh, I have to do that. Like I've talked to so many people that are pastors that are like, that's like the Sunday I dread. Like I don't even want to do a sermon series around it because like that is the worst time of the year. Like it's like, okay, if you feel that way, everyone else is going to feel that way too. So what would be a Commitment Sunday you'd be excited about? I mean, is it a I mean, it really could just be all testimonies of what God's been doing.
And don't design these in isolation. Oftentimes, pastors, especially in mainline denominations, we become so institutional that we're generalist, and we think we have to do everything, right? We think we have to be an expert at everything. That's where you build a team that can help, who does have a pulse on the congregation, who does have gifts maybe in worship. Think about how to make worship lively that day, every day, but that day specific, because you don't want to just give them something that's stale, processed, and recycled. And so inviting a team to help you shape what that worship experience is going to look like, I think is really important. And you don't have to be the one to have all of the vision and to have all the detail for it, but that's the power in the team.
Yeah. So who are those thought leaders in your church that are great at brainstorming? We're fortunate in that like our worship leader is also that way, but our online worship person is really gifted in that area. And then we've got some lay folks that we've added to that team who are just really creative, but also will tell you if an idea is just like a pastor idea that like actually won't translate to the rest of the church, but like who's going to be that honest person, but is really good at brainstorming. That's not going to automatically shut down every idea, but will again breathe into that possibility, the what if. Like you probably know there's some people in your church that would be great for stuff like that, and others that would positionally be on that, but not actually good for that. So you do something special that's not an official team, but this is the a brainstorming team, an idea team, you can create a team that has a new title that means if your worship leader like shuts down every creative idea, they don't have to be on that team. Create the team that you really need because of the people that are on it.
Oftentimes we'll look at positions and we'll say, well, they need to be on the team. But if their first tendency is always to say no and how it won't work, they're not the ones that should be on this kind of innovation. I mean, steal Sue's language, of this innovation team for worship and generosity. It's probably more than you wanted to know, but I think it was good to talk through it.
I feel like y'all are getting that with every question you're asking. We're like, we got 20 ideas for you.
Oh, thank you. That's good.
I know that you answered this question already, but I had to leave my office. What does ROI, show ROI mean again?
Yeah, it's return on investment. I'm sorry for just saying that, but yeah, it's return on investment. So, in the business world, we're always after market share, right? We want to increase our market share, our global footprint. In the church, what's our return on investment? Making disciples. It's changed lives. What else do you equate? You get to pick your own scorecard. That's the beauty of COVID, if there's any beauty in it. Because think about it. Attendance is hard to come by, right? Every church in America is facing it. I don't know what statistical reports will look like Alan Crum in the future, right? I mean, are they worth any? But you get to form your own scorecard. So is it the number of people you're feeding in the community? Is it the number of school supplies you're supplying the school? You get to come up with that, and that's your return on investment. It's changed lives, it's impact. And so I'd be remiss anytime I stand up on a Sunday, if I'm doing the offering, I'm talking about something that is a return on an investment, just to really be able to cast that vision, because it's good to remind them. And then sometimes I'm just saying, hey, I just want to thank you. And that's my message, like for that giving talk. Thank you, because you're doing it. Here's how you're doing it, and you're doing it. We can't thank you enough.
So if you haven't caught on already, we're both pretty passionate about that offering time as one of kind of the low-hanging fruits. So whatever the size of your congregation, whether you're worshiping only online or in person or both, that is a really just simple way to start with encouraging a generosity movement. And you'll be surprised how quickly that adds up, because I'm jealous. Like in fundraising for not a church, I don't have 52 times a year where I'm in front of donors, but you get that every week. And so Roz and Wayne, who was on here earlier, pastor new church plant. Well, a couple years in, they needed to do a capital campaign. Had never done a capital campaign before, newer donors because they haven't been connected long, but they've been doing that weekly vision casting, so that when they did sit down to do a capital campaign, they did a lot of those personal gatherings, some group gatherings, but also some personal gatherings, some impact type. But when they went down to have those individual meetings with donors, they'd been hearing over and over and over again what God's doing, how they're
ready to give right away.
Like it wasn't hard. He didn't have to cast vision first. But so that is, if you are like, oh my goodness, so many ideas, where do I start? Start with that weekly offering moment and really make it impactful, and think, gosh, if someone was new to my church today, what would I want to share about how generosity is making an impact through my church? And think not with insider language either, because we often, if you say, no, the ushers are going to come collect the offering. Like if someone's new to Jesus, never been to church before, and they're like, an offering? What's an offering? Like, what do you mean? What is that? Think like with that lens of what would someone brand new want to know that would just encourage them that God is on the move and up to something here.
And this is what I know. Some pastors have different philosophies. I like to know who my givers are. So let's say if I agree to go be a president of a nonprofit and you tell me I couldn't know who my givers were, I wouldn't want to do it, because you're bringing people along. And as you encourage them in their generosity, so that's one of the measures of discipleship, right? Because we want to encourage people to give in that. So that's how we select our leaders at the churches that we pastored. That's one of the metrics, but hey, we want you on this path. Also, if someone's giving has fallen off, then that's an indication something is going on there. Maybe there's a job loss. Maybe they're about to leave. What I have found out too is when we've adopted older congregations that we've kind of on-ramped, the ornery people, if I look up their giving record, and I did this, I don't even see their name, or it's non-existent. And they've been the ones that have been kind of holding the church back for years and have held that church hostage. So again, it's not you're going to treat people different. Knowledge is power. And it's going to impact the way you lead and make decisions. It's not showing favoritism, but it helps give you a perspective of where people are at, even on that spiritual level.
One thing I might mention, because I know folks ask this question, is how do you handle tithing? Like, do you say, has to be 10%? The Bible talks about tithing, so we definitely preach about that and explain why and how, but there's also grace. So what does it look like to be on that journey? I mean, you heard Carrie's story earlier, and she'd been increasing the percent she was giving every year, and now is at 11%. I mean, if you probably could figure, well, she probably didn't start at 10% if she's been increasing every year and it's just now at 11, but she also didn't stop at 10% either. So if you can help people get to percentage giving, but then also challenge them to, if they want to get to tithing and they don't feel like they can start somewhere, like don't let that make people say, well, I'm just not going to, but also don't be afraid to say, what might God want to do if you step out in faith and start giving 10% of your income.
This is not shaming people. This is you're loving and encourage. This is what you want for them. And you want them to pay aggressively on debt. Like, hey, a lot of times we'll say, well, if I didn't have so much debt, or I have to wait until I make more. And usually when that happens, people never start the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's another thing that I always make sure, especially in that offering moment, is to use we or you and me language, because I'm on that journey too. And often if you start saying you should, then people they feel that guilt, even if you're not trying. So what's that? hey, guess what we get to do, not what we have to, but we get to be a part of what God is doing, that opportunity language, and that isn't it amazing that God would use you and me to do this? Like just that excitement, but the get to, and also the you and me language is really helps with the excitement and taking the guilt out of it. And often I'll name it too, like this is not a guilt thing. This is not a have to. This is a get, like just calling that out, because so often people have been made to feel guilty in churches for not giving more.
Well, thank you, Roz and Callie, for this exchange with all of us. And those of us on the webinar today may have more questions. And if you do, Roz and Callie, would you like to drop your email addresses in the chat, or put the slide back up just in case people didn't catch that? Because I know you'd be happy to continue to interact individually with this being your passion. And it's really so important, you know, as we lead and disciple people in the church, that we see financial material discipleship with the same priority as spiritual maturity and discipleship, and missional maturity and discipleship. And the financial material discipleship isn't something to give to a committee over here. You know, this is also part of our leadership of God's church, and you've really emphasized that and helped us so much. Does anybody have any final question that you're thinking, oh, I don't want this to end till I have a chance to put it out there?
I have a very United Methodist question. So if there are not United Methodists on the call, I could do it another time. But so I told you this is a new appointment for me, and they really feel like they have accomplished something by always paying their apportionments. And I do want to celebrate that. I don't want to minimize it, but it's also like, because they are operating from a scarcity mindset, it's like, okay, well, we got to have to pay our apportionments. And then they don't think beyond that in terms of investing in our local community or any kind of international missions. Like it really is just apportionments. Do you have any thoughts on how to celebrate that, but also shift away from it?
I would start with, the starting point might be, what do those apportionments go for? And, I know the denominations put together, and for the non-United Methodist, each local church is supposed to give up to the denominational level. So you might be in a different denomination where there's, again, an expectation to give up to a denominational level. And so the denomination I know has resources of, hey, here's what those apportionment dollars went to do. And there is a lot of missional stuff in that. So the starting point might be shifting them from like just, hey, we paid our apportionments, to, hey, through our denominational giving, we've done X, Y, Z, and like starting there in part to even just, if you have new people come to the church that are like, apportionments, what? Like, we're part of a denomination. Well, it helps them get to, again, back toward the why. But I would say, and then going back to the why for some of the other, like, what is God called our church to do? Like, what is our why? Who are we called to reach? Who are the partners for doing that as well? What would you add? Anything else there?
The denominational giving covers that whole thing. So money that's in, not just paying salaries, but money around the world, right? But I think you can then extend it forward and say, here are local opportunities right in your backyard. We don't want to just stop at this mile marker. We want to continue to go forward. And it might mean changing the language of our job as pastors are translators. We have to translate to people what the gospel is, and even denominational lingo. So instead of apportionments, is it missional giving or connectional giving or global giving? If that's what you're doing, using that, and then, but we also want to think global. We want to act globally, or think globally, act locally, and so we want to do both those things.
Another resource, Roz wrote a book on his own called 5 Loaves and 2 Fish that helps especially if your church is trying to figure out, I basically just got 5 loaves and 2 fish. We don't have much to be able to do giving. Like, how are we going to do this? It's about how to fund ministry with limited resources. And one of the keys in there is thinking, what assets do you have? And who are partners that you can partner with to do more? And so it might be that, you know, you're probably not going to get them to be able to stretch to giving in the community yet, but what would it look like to share your building with a
Welcome them in.
partner, with a nonprofit, and let them have space for free, but that expands the ministry opportunities of the church with assets that the church already has.
Thank you so much, Roz and Callie. And it's right at 2:30. And we could go on for a lot longer, couldn't we, everybody? Really digging deep on this. Roz and Callie, how soon will the copy of your book be mailed to the participants in the webinar? What should they expect?
Probably
They'll probably go out next week.
yeah, probably early next week,
When they'll go
Monday.
in the mail. So
You'll mail them Monday? Okay.
Monday.
where you are, when you'll get them.
All right. So everybody, you can kind of think through when to expect it. If by the end of next week you haven't received it, be sure and let us know so we can follow up. And also take a look at the Leading Voices webpage on the Innovation website, the United webpage called Leading Voices, because we have 3 more coming up. Super exciting. There's going to be one, for example, later in September about digital ministry mission fields that you may never even have heard of, that are completely new frontier for the church, and practitioners on how they're reaching people for Christ through those. We're going to have lots of fun this fall. And we're so glad you're part of the Leading Voices community as we look to see how to resource God's church. May we pray together as we finish up. Roz, you want to pray us out?
Sure. God, thank you first of all, for the Innovation Center and Sue and hosting us. And I want to thank you for my friends and colleagues here. Lord, I know that it can be tempting right now to give up. It can be tempting to want to quit. It could be tempting to be overwhelmed with money and people and budgets and all of attendance and all of the things that these pressures, maybe they're internal pressures or denominational pressures. God, I just ask for freedom for my brothers and sisters today, that they would be obedient to you. They would remember their why, that their calling is not from any person, but their calling is from you. And so, God, I just pray as they seek you and starting and igniting a generosity movement, that you would lead them and guide them in their congregations. And we pray, Lord, that you would unlock and open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing that they can't even contain. That's our prayer, Lord. That's our hope. Bless them this day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.